Hey everyone, this is very good, thank you. C4 Metro Subcommittee. Today is Wednesday, March 20th. Welcome to spring. Um, Glad to have you all here. And so today is going to be the Karen Burig show. I think today she's got every topic today, which is awesome. We appreciate that. Anything for the good of the order before we jump into presentations? Very good. Karen, good morning. The floor is yours.
And this is ever so wonderful to be with you. But Brian, I would also ask that you bring in Jamie Lorenzini because it truly isn't the Karen Burig show. Um, we really kind of work together on the staff level on these issues to support all of you. And Jamie Lorenzini and myself are both TPAC representatives. And being TPAC representatives, we often get a preview of what's coming to JPAC. So on today's agenda, we have a fairly open agenda today. Let's see, I got a variety of different things going, but we're here to talk both about the JPAC agenda as well as the notes from the TPAC meeting. So both of those kind of come together. I do know on your agenda today, it talks about going over the JPAC agenda first. And I will just touch on a couple of things because the JPAC agenda actually is fairly light. There aren't too many items on the JPAC agenda, and if I'm saying something wrong, someone else jump in. But on the JPAC agenda, there's one item that is it's a consent agenda item, and as y'all are familiar with, practically monthly at JPAC, there are consent agenda items related to amending the MTIP to bring in projects that have either funding that has been identified for them, or if there are changes that are needed to projects that are on the MTIP that fall within kind of the scope of being able to just amend the MTIP, they're brought forward on the consent agenda. And so today, for tomorrow's JPAC meeting, there is one item on that MTIP consent agenda, and it is an amendment in bringing in a project that ODOT has. So you all may be familiar with the Carbon Reduction Fund program, and there are certain funds within that Carbon Fund Reduction program that were directed towards ODOT, and ODOT created a plan on how to expend those funds. And one of those projects that ODOT has is to look at their signal system and improve the way their signals work on ODOT facilities, on specific ODOT facilities, and make an investment. And so that information is in the packet. Now, when we were doing the review initially, there were some concerns that there wasn't a project in Clackamas County included within that bundle of projects. But kind of talking back and forth with ODOT this past week, they did clarify that one of the corridors that will be included in the signal improvements is the Highway 212, 224 corridor, and there will be about 10 signals that will be looked at and improved. So that all will be as a part of a consent agenda item. And then the next item on the JPAC agenda is a discussion item. It's actually the first in a set of series of meetings. And again, there was some clarification sent out just last night about the JPAC work program and the series of meetings related to kind of regional transportation priorities and funding. And so maybe what I could do is I'll share my screen with respect to what we were just sent out last night for that particular agenda item. Let me see. I have a variety of things on my, just give me 1 second. And okay, I had all these things opened up. Oh, I know, it's a PDF, I think. Okay, sorry. Here we go. Share screen. Okay, so so as a part of the JPAC packet has a work program that's associated with it. And so just last night we were sent this updated version just for clarification about the fact that there's actually going to be several meetings to talk about regional transportation priorities and funding. So anything in blue here over the next few months at JPAC, they'll be talking about the transportation priority. So it's going to start off with this month, Lindsay Baker from ODOT talking about the ODOT fiscal cliff. There'll be opportunities then in April to actually talk about the regional perspective. It looks like in May, they will be focusing on alternative funding measures, excuse me, and some outside speakers on that. In June, there'll be a recap of HB 2017, as well as some, so that they'll be talking both on the state side and with TriMet. And then it looks like into July, they'll be talking specifically about JPAC legislative priorities. So I'm gonna stop sharing that. So that really covers, I will say, the JPAC agenda. And I think at this point, I'm going to pause because I know the way that our agenda is set up here is that we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about the kind of TPAC memo. So
Good. Paul, please.
Yeah. Karen, I guess I have two things, but let's just take the last one first. I did speak to Chair Gonzalez, JPAC Chair Gonzalez, about this yesterday morning, and I'm kind of concerned. I don't mind all those different organizations, entities talking about regional transportation priorities, but you know, we being local governments, who are, you know, who really own the systems around, you know, along with ODOT as well, should have a say in what those regional priorities are. I'm kind of concerned that AOC, for example, or LOC may not have the same exact regional experience and knowledge and close to that. So it seems to me that who should be talking about the regional priorities? You know, we might hear what maybe that is from ODOT's perspective. We might know what that is from AOC's perspective and LOC's perspective. But when does our perspective count? Seems like we don't really have a voice here. We should have a voice. We should have a say in what our priorities are, and not have the last word or no word. So maybe Councilor Lewis can add to that. The other thing, while I have this opportunity, I just want to go back to the signal timing one on 212. I hope there's some regional coverage of that program. I think it's really important, and I think it'd be really educational for people to realize that how important that really is. I'm a big believer, and by background and just kind of having that, knowing that cars moving smoothly with the least interruption and stop and go is going to have the greatest greenhouse gas benefit and reduction of gases as those cars are moving. So I know we have issues on the road through Happy Valley, Sunnyside Road, Highway 212, McLaughlin Boulevard, you know, Highway 43, Highway 213. I mean, we have a lot of examples where that could be employed, and I'm just hoping that that peanut butter is spread around the region so that we all get a piece of it. I'll leave it there and want to hear everyone's response to that. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you for those comments. I appreciate that. And yes, you would think in today's environment, don't we have like AI ability to control the signal timing based on the kind of inputs, or is it still have a manual process where people physically observe what happens and adjust timing based on that? I don't know enough about it, so I think it's interesting. Councilor Lewis, want to chime in?
Sure, thanks. I want to speak specifically to the agenda item tomorrow, as well as the whole series of events in blue on the JPAC agenda. First, about the conversation tomorrow, ODOT is leading it because the hope is to receive the fiscal cliff of the gas tax report that, Commissioner, you've seen twice, I believe, already, because it's gone through the Act 1 process. And the hope is to actually ground everybody at the table with the most up-to-date numbers about how long we have before gas tax truly gives out. And I know it's Lindsay Baker and not Travis or the actual ODOT economist. But I do think that we were trying to get basically the economist's report on money in, how big that pie is before it goes 50, 30, 20, or, before any, like, as the gas tax peters off, it affects everybody who has gas tax, including City of Portland and everybody's local gas taxes. So the hope is that tomorrow everybody comes off grounded with the updated numbers about gas tax, because some people think that is a far off, distant future question. But when you really start to compare that to the number of legislative sessions we have before we are just stalled out and unable to do anything, that's the understanding we need to come to tomorrow. And then secondarily, the number of conversations that we're having, bringing in transportation folks from the state table. The hope there is to help us understand all of the voices that the legislature will be listening to as we shape a very particular perspective that hopefully JPAC will come with one local/regional approach to how we are going to advocate in the 25 session for a transportation package. So that is why not only are we doing the grounding with the fiscal realities tomorrow, but why AOC and LOC, who have a lot of influence at the legislature, will have an opportunity to share their hot take, 20 to 30 minutes, knowing perfectly well that there are going to be many places we don't align with them, and as a region are going to advocate for something different or a slightly different flavor of what they're asking for statewide. So it's kind of like a little series in order to, by the end of the year, have had plenty of discussions about what other things legislators are going to be hearing from the truckers, from LOC, from AOC, so that at the end of this, we come up with something before session. Because in 2017, you're in the chaos of session and things are moving quickly. And if you don't have a strong foundational document, that's when things get slightly wonky and, projects get moved around in the last month and the last week.
Very good, Paul.
Yeah, appreciate that, Counselor. I don't disagree with anything you said. However, I think one important note is that I think that needs to be a bi-directional conversation. I think it needs to go both ways. They need to know what our issues are and priorities are, as well as we need to know what the states are. I don't disagree at all, but I'm not sure the table is going to be set that way, and I hope it is. But we have not established, other than our, pre-formed or existing priorities, or if you want to look at the RTP or something like that, other than that, I don't think that we have recalibrated to this latest change. Obviously, no one has. It's only been a week. But I'm just kind of concerned that a lot of our assumptions were based on the legislative priorities as set in HB 2017, and that has been changed not by the state legislature, but that's been done by ODOT staff. So how we convey that to ODOT, how we convey that, or when or how, what platform, and the AOC and LOC, I think is really important. So one other little thing of background you may not all know is that over a year ago, I worked really hard to get this joint conversation between AOC and LOC started. We kickstarted that last year. We've had about 3 meetings, and I think there's a 4th one coming to get the funding conversation started, because some of us, that funding cliff you talked about, Counselor, I don't disagree with that either. I completely agree with that, but we saw that a long time ago, and ironically, whether it was at the R1 Act level or at the state level, we were just like patted on the head saying, oh, we got this. You know, that's our call to make. And it's like our voices weren't even wanted. So that's why this conversation got started with AOC and LOC. And I will tell you that my colleagues around the state, city and county, they don't fully understand what we're facing up here, but they are concerned about it. There's a lot of moving pieces of that, but I think that's why it needs to be a bi-directional conversation, because I think they get mixed messages from us. It's clear that sometimes a state legislator who might have a certain ideology, and maybe a strong voice, let's just say one of the co-chairs of the Transportation Subcommittee, you know, putting out that particular her particular perspective is not necessarily reflective of what the region is, right? So it taints what our message is. So I think we need to clarify. I think we have an opportunity and a responsibility to clarify what our position is. And lastly, I just want to let you all know that a newsletter just came out from that particular state legislature, now putting in writing what we've heard for about a year down the halls. And the rumor is that geez, that 20% that the cities get of gas tax and the 30% that counties get, she might not want to share that any longer with us. I think that's a concern. So that's a red flag. I can't wait to talk to my colleagues at the AOC level, but that's a huge concern for everyone in this room right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. And I guess, I'm curious. So, we have this kind of ongoing conversation about the fiscal cliff and gas tax. So just as far as like the order of operations. So right now we're kind of discussing that aspect of it, but that ties into much broader budgeting conversations in the future and other budgeting tools or revenue generation tools that potentially will be discussed. So are we, and I'm just looking for anybody to weigh in. Do we look at that one piece in a silo initially so that we can kind of quantify it and lay the foundation for the future conversations, rather than kind of looking at the broad spectrum initially? And then I also am always curious, again, in my mind, one easy answer is raise the gas tax. I mean, that is something that we just don't have the political appetite for, that at least I don't think so. But if our goal is to, cover a part of that shortfall and help transition away from, internal combustion engines over the long term, that seems like a really logical way to do it. And it's potentially a bit of a usury fee in that the more you drive, the more you pay. So those are my thoughts. Karen, please.
So I just wanted to say that for this particular item, where we're talking about the regional priorities and the transportation funding, this particular item doesn't go through TPAC. So we don't have on TPAC the place to discuss this. And I say this more from, as we hear around the C4 Metro table, and then perhaps the broader C4 table, thinking about how we may want to set up the agendas for these meetings to be able to have space to talk about, our local priorities, that could then help feed into those JPAC conversations. I think I say that because they're not going to come organically just through the TPAC agenda, which a lot of the times this particular meeting is set up around. So I guess I would encourage maybe some conversation about how this group would like to be engaged in supporting their JPAC members as we move into this sort of season of various meetings around funding. So I just wanted to throw that out as the sort of fodder for conversation.
Mayor Buck, you're one of those voices at the table. You've heard us out this morning. Like to hear your thoughts on what you've gleaned here this morning.
Well, thanks, Commissioner. I mean, it seems like I guess I'm curious to hear how they frame the conversation tomorrow, but it obviously, seems like the right, direction to be moving. I mean, we've got our plan. I think we have projects. I'm not sure our projects have been prioritized and reprioritized many times. So for me, that's not so much of a question. I mean, it's more how are we going to work together on this funding package? It's what we've been talking about for the past couple of years. So it's nice to be able now to frame this as a regional discussion so that we're all kind of somewhat coalesced. And I know that, throughout the region, folks have, we have a different perspective perhaps in Clackamas than our colleagues in Multnomah and Washington counties. But we got to have some, unified voice. And I think we worked pretty well with our colleagues to somewhat get there, even through this last, process with the tolling. And that was, I mean, it's a tough process, and people brought different perspectives to the table. But I think, we use that opportunity to form good relationships and talk about or better understand situations throughout the Tri-County area and how they are quite different. And so I don't know, I'm looking forward to it. It seems like a positive thing to me that the JPAC's convening this conversation. I know that staff at Metro has been rather on top of it and seeming to want to, dial in to the nuances, the different jurisdictions. So, but it's as we see, we shall see. And of course, I'm very interested in any particular feedback this group has. If you want me to carry forward to the JPAC table, and we'll just have to stay in good communication as the conversation evolves.
Very good. Jamie?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Just as a little bit of historical context, when we talk about JPAC's series of discussions, in advance of that state transportation package in 2017, JPAC developed a legislative agenda for that package. And my sense from, I think, the JPAC packet and also a recent conversation that the Metro Council had is that Metro appears interested in doing something similar for 24-25. So looking toward JPAC, I wonder if it might be helpful to ask staff to clarify at what point in this discussion series will a draft agenda start percolating up for discussion, and which bodies will contribute in bringing together those various pieces of feedback. I think in the past, it may have been Metro staff and TriMet. So understanding which voices are contributing toward that initial draft document and when it's going to come may help set expectations going forward.
Yeah, Jamie, thanks for that. So hit a little bit of history. Back when we were at this point, at this juncture in 2016, what we had in place was the JPAC Finance Subcommittee that was led by the then chair, Craig Dirksen. And so we had that conversation. We had some polling numbers, we had some analysis, and then early in the year, we got a legislative ask saying, okay, Metro Region, what do you all want for a package? What are your top priorities? And we worked, met down at Multnomah County Building almost every Friday for, a few months. And we came up with those 3 bottlenecks and some transit stuff and so on. We had a pretty good idea of what a lot of that was. And right now, I think that we're a little bit, it's a little bit different. We're a little bit adrift now. I mean, the last 7 days have been interesting with this. I mean, if you look at the role of JPAC, which is the MPO, it's not Metro, it's kind of a joint Metro JPAC role, but JPAC is the policy thing. And I agree with Karen's interpretation that TPAC's role, I'll just paraphrase, maybe it's not exactly what she said, but it's more on the technical side. It's not really led by TPAC, it's the policymakers that kind of get things going and point the ship into where it's, going to be headed. But I just feel we're more adrift. We have a JPAC trip going to Washington, D.C. here in just a couple months, and I'm not sure what our priorities are. Normally, we're more organized than this. But again, we were thrown a curveball last week. And how that relates to our climate goals, I don't know. How that relates to our funding goals, far more challenging, I agree. But what I'm just saying is that in the work plan, there ought to be a place strategically timed in which we gather our priorities and we set forth. We have our retreat scheduled for June, C4 retreat scheduled for June. Our staff, C4 staff, whatnot, were, strongly, and I don't disagree, emphasizing that by June we should know at least what C4's priorities are, not JPAC's, but similarly, so that when the session, so to speak, starts getting up to speed, which is September of the year before, meaning this September, by September, let's know what we're trying to be lobbying for. So when they start meeting in advance of that, we're ready to go. And I don't see anything in the work plan that gives us that opportunity to form that. Unless I'm missing something, help me. So I'm inclined, I'll just stop talking here. I'm inclined to argue tomorrow and everywhere else that we get our priorities established, our regional priorities established as soon as possible. Thank you.
Very good. Appreciate those comments. Mayor Butt.
Well, I would have two questions. One for Jamie. Do you know why why isn't this part of the TPAC work plan? This new series of conversations on the JPAC agenda. Do you know?
I don't, but I would agree with Commissioner Savis's assessment that TPAC is a more technical body. We look at policy alternatives as opposed to some of these political topics. And I might look at Karen for a head nod if she agrees.
Yeah, I would agree. And, and I think as technical staff, we would point to the work that was done as a part of the RTP, right? But even as a part of the RTP, that's a whole suite of priorities. And this next step is really trying to focus that on what are the priorities in the near term, just that small handful. And that really is led by the policymakers.
That said, I would also point out that this coming state package is a different type of animal. In prior packages, they've been very project-centric. But one thing the governor has recently said is they have to do the basics and commit projects that are in the queue before beginning new projects. There also needs to be maintenance and those types of things as well. And a recurring phrase we've heard is back to basics. So when we start talking about next year's package, I'm curious how the conversation will perhaps migrate from specific projects or new projects to focusing on revenue streams. And that's just personal subjective opinion. Trent Wilson said something very insightful that money brings us together, projects tear us apart. So food for thought.
Okay, thank you. Well, so maybe something that it seems like maybe as the conversation evolves, then pieces of it will go to TPAC, especially as we discuss revenue. It seems critical. You guys played a huge role in this past conversation we had around funding and the tolling and the RMPP and the analysis of those alternatives. So I guess that's just something we'll have to work with our friends that know who sets the TPAC agenda, I guess is.
So the who sets the TPAC agenda, similar to what JPAC has is that we also have a work program, right? And when there are particular issues that come forward due to timing, right? Because they have set deadlines. And then we also have things on that work program that may not be as driven by deadlines. And they're broader, I wouldn't necessarily say more informational, but ultimately, the chair of that committee is is Metro staff. And I think Metro staff works with both what we know is coming our way and how we can get the most information and what is needed to feed into JPAC. So I think that's how those agendas are created.
Okay. Okay. And then Commissioner Sass, when you say like our priorities, are you talking about project? I just want to clarify. Are you talking about project priorities? Are you talking about like funding priorities? Or what exactly are you talking about?
Well, clearly, and I don't disagree with a lot of what's said. I think right now the priority for AOC LOC joint conversation has been funding, right? So I think funding solutions have got to be right there at the forefront. You can't have projects if you don't have money. So it's a foolish argument. I agree completely that we have incompleted projects that have not been completed as set forth in HB 2017. I know the governor's fully aware of that, and I think she's committed to that, it sounds like. So those projects need to be completed first. I don't know about you all, but we've been talking to and hearing from state legislators that are on the Transportation Committee about some of the things they're thinking of, as well as the OTC, as well as the OTA on the transit side. So one of those legislative priorities, just to put this in the queue here, just to plant a seed, is what the legislative priority intent was when it came to transit and that employee tax, not the employer tax. What the legislative intent was, if that turns out to be a delta of $20 million more that should have been in Clackamas County, whether in or out of the TriMet district, that's a lot of money for service on an annual basis. So I want to see some fixes to and some completion to what was in there. So, but again, Mayor, my point is that usually by the JPAC trip, we got our regional priorities kind of established for the trip. I don't know what they are. And usually by summer, we know what our priorities are before the full session. And we have that established as well prior to the upcoming full session next year. And I don't see anything in the work plan. This is my point. There's nothing in the work plan that gets us there. And my role now at the R1 Act, I will be doing the same thing. I'm going to be arguing that we get in the work plan a step towards that. I've been fighting for that as one of the agenda setters on R1 Act. And recently, I'm not sure if you all know this, but Roy Rogers of Washington County is no longer the chair. I've now been, honored to be now the chair, and serving the co-chair now, or the vice chair at the R1 Act, is Mayor Lube from Tigard. So we have a new team, and I think we are going to try to get our agenda at the R1 Act aligned. So I'd like to see JPAC right alongside of us in sync.
Very good. Thank you for weighing in. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thanks. So I just want to say, I think your concerns around JPAC trip prep are a little bit separate from the concerns here around what we're doing in a legislative timeline. Because our priorities for the federal agenda are always different than our priorities at the state agenda. And so I just want to separate that. So I think you're trying to just raise you don't know what the game plan is generally, and let's fix that. Let's have better communication between you and Chair Gonzalez. Let's figure out where the breakdown is at the staff level. I don't know what's going to fix that, but let's get you the game plan. But in terms of the plan here for the JPAC agendas coming up through this fall, in order for us to have a draft agenda in September, October, which is the goal. October, I think, is the box that would have had the no guest speaker, lots of time for talking on the work plan. We will have a number of presentations in the months that we all saw on the screen in order to get the exact same context that the legislature is getting, and then respond. Because I believe that this session, it will be inappropriate to walk in with a project list. I think we can have a couple of priorities about projects that we like, but our priority list is going to be around funding, because that's what the legislature needs to do. How much gas tax can they raise? For how long will that last? What can they do with a registration fee? What is their agenda when it comes to exploring and implementing new funding sources like VMT, like the possibility of an electricity surcharge. What are the pluses and minuses of that? What are our opinions of those? Those are the things that the legislature is going to be faced with. They're going to be curious our opinion of. That's what we're trying to get educated on, not only the technical side of it, but also what other people, other loud voices at the legislature are saying, so we know who our allies are, who we're in concert with, who we're close to, who we're far from. And then when it comes to the opportunity to go to DC, obviously we are in the context of trying to get those sweet, sweet federal dollars. We've gone for a number of years with big bridge projects. We still have one of those. In fact, now we have 3 of those. So I think we have plenty of opportunity to not only ask that we get in the queue for some of the big funding opportunities, but as we heard Representative Blumenauer last year, is no longer adequate to tell the story the same way we've been telling it for years, because every other region in the country has copied our playbook. And so we are actively working with Summit, who I know many of you know well, to get our script a little bit more modern and responsive to the federal priorities and the narrative of what it means to be Portland in the Portland region right now. So I do think that there's a question as to, you know, who's going to have which part of the script, but that's always coming out 3 weeks before. That's always right just in time. So I guess let's get you in a place where you understand who's doing what parts in the prep.
Very good. Appreciate that feedback. Mr. Wilson.
Hi there, thanks for having me. I feel like I'm at a few tables where I can help a little bit with some of these conversations. And so with the planning, the regional transportation planning, there has been a lot of conversation at the regional lobby table to help inform a little bit about what JPAC is working on. And to Jamie's point earlier that we came to the January JPAC meeting to sort of conceptualize a way to help JPAC walk through those conversations. Obviously, there's a little bit of staffing swirlage going on right now with some of our lobby team who are in different leaves, which is great. And so we're still working together on some of those pieces, but we are meeting now that the session is over every other week to continue to talk about this very conversation. And I'm hearing you say, and we've been talking about it internally, marrying up some more policy people into that conversation at the staff level to help inform maybe what's going on at the metro level. So I'm hearing you, and I can take that to my meeting. It's actually this afternoon to see what it looks like to bring in more policy people into some of that planning discussion before it gets up to the JPAC work plan and calendar and so on. So I'll be working on that, hearing you loud and clear, and hopefully we see that start to unpack moving forward. And then I'll just add for the JPAC, it has been a little wiggly. There's been a little bit of confusion about, you know, what is going to be on the agenda. I think the tolling conversation, you know, ecosystem change that's just happened is going to maybe inform some of that because there's been a little bit of disagreement about what will we talk about. Is it going to be a thank you tour for the over $1 billion of grants that have gone into the region in the last 6 months for Rose Quarter and for IBR? That's certainly part of it. You know, there's projects all over the region. And so it's been a little bit of like, we should talk about tolling, we should not talk about tolling. So it looks like we're all on the same page. Now that conversation is really wiggly because of the new letter from the governor. And so I think that creates a different dynamic on how we approach some of the delegation offices. And there's just a lot of need. And so actually one thing that we're talking about to try to marry up the conversation between the federal and the state is the IIJA, the big federal transportation package has like another year or 2 left before it sort of comes to an end. And so if the state is about to do a transportation package right near the end of the federal one, it makes sense, I think, and this is what I'm asking for in those meetings, to start talking about what we need to do at the state level to be ready for the next federal package. What can we put in place now so that we're ready to start applying for those next federal dollars that are going to get approved here in a year or 2? And I think that's a fruitful conversation we can have with our delegation. What are you hearing in DC? What are your colleagues talking about so that we can build something in Oregon that we can have a kickstart on when you pass those dollars and on day one, we're applying for things because we've set our state up to be successful to go after some of those pieces. So I'm hoping that our agenda sort of moves towards that for the JPAC visit to DC. In addition to the thank you tour for over $1 billion in federal grants to projects here in the region. That's a huge win. I know none of that's in Clackamas County, so that's tough. But we do have good projects here in Clackamas County we can go and highlight. So I wanted to add some context to some of the tables I've been at to help with some of this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Trent. One thing I just want to add, and Counselor Lewis, just so that you understand what I kind of see or don't see, and that is that, you know, in my years or decades, I feel like an old guy when I say that, but just dating back to all these years I've been following MPAC and JPAC as closely as I have, there always seemed to be, you know, some level of coordination and plan and strategy. And for the first time, and I'm not blaming anyone at all, should not be a reflection. I think it's more a reflection on how messed up our transportation conversation has been going statewide, legislature, OTC, tolling, RTAC. I mean, it's so convoluted like never before. But from my perspective, we don't have much coordination. We really don't have a strategy really in place that we all agree on, all these different organizations. And there's been, again, a little bit of disruption here in the last week or so with still even more uncertainty. So I think it'd be of value, for example, to say, yes, you know what, we agree with the entire legislative intent and package of HB 2017. That might be a good start to at least affirm that we support the bottleneck projects, that we support the transit funding, at least the legislative intent. And if I can, I just want to tap Dwight here, one of our transit people, and get the perspective of OTA. I know there's been some conversations about how well this STIF funding is working or not working around the state, and then how it's not working necessarily in the metro region. But if the OTA is going to be one of our partners and they need to be informed, what legislative timing do you see, Dwight, where they could be an ally with us?
Well, and thank you, Commissioner, and you're absolutely right. The OTA started working on, well, we formed a policy subcommittee and a revenue subcommittee. And so the two are working kind of in parallel to one another. As a matter of fact, we should have meetings coming up probably later this month or the next month. What the two committees are looking at, and I'm on the policy committee, because that's where I think the rubber meets the road. Sure, it's great to ask for more funding. If you literally have projects that you know, that you can actually perform with that funding. One of the things that we're all struggling with as transit agencies is hiring drivers, and HB 2017, the funding that comes through the employer payroll tax is supposed to be to add and enhance service, and certainly that is a challenge if you can't hire the personnel to do that. So I think the timing on this discussion is timely. I think having myself and others, Andy Howell sits on the policy committee as well, and I think some of the things that C4, I think last meeting was presented with some alternative funding disbursement possibilities that in some cases would be controversial to some. You heard some pushback a little bit from TriMet on that, but my whole focus is on the policy side of it. I think the funding is, you know, folks are going to come with their buckets, trying to get their buckets filled. But if we don't fix this thing, all we're doing is throwing money at it, at something that's broken. And I'm not interested in personally in doing that. So I'd love to work with all of you, you know, to kind of get a sense of what the priorities are. I can take those back to OTA. And if they're policy related, even funding related, if, if that's the direction we want to go. But for me, I think we have to fix what's broken before we can start throwing more money at it. That will be my testimony if asked. Without the fixes, there's no way I could support more money for transit, and that sounds kind of odd. But again, not interested in throwing money at something that, in my opinion, needs, there's some fixes that are needed, so.
Okay, well, thank you, Dwight. I just want to make sure that that you all understand I'm coming from this positive, constructive standpoint that we have an opportunity to set and work in partnership with all these folks. And I think we can be part of that and move forward on coordinating and collaborating with all these partners to help our legislators understand where we stand as a region. I think that's the value in it. Take my message as positive and constructive and coordinating, and on any kind of help we could have at all these tables, including tomorrow morning, would help. Mayor Buck, thank you. I see you nodding in agreement. So if anyone has any differing opinions, and I would love to have all your help and guidance, staff, electeds, all of you here at the table, help guide that and shape it. But let's team up and move the ball.
Very good. Good conversation. Seems like it might be a good jumping off point to jump into TPAC, or can we put a bow on this one? Do we have any additional TPAC information from Karen, Jamie?
So I guess I will just share about, not on this particular topic, but on the TPAC agenda. So that moving into your next agenda item, which is the TPAC memo. But I did want to share the fact that at our last TPAC meeting, we actually had several different items. It's kind of a preview into what JPAC will be talking about in the next coming months. There's actually quite a few I don't know, big discussion items and actual action items that are being teed up. And so a few of those items, so, and again, there's the TPAC summary memo within your packet that really provides a lot of details around the conversation. But high level is that we had an informational item about the West Side Multimodal Improvement Study. That was very interesting for someone like myself who did not participate in that study to learn about kind of what the overall outcomes of the study were. There was an item about the 24-25 Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP. So some of you who have been sitting around this table for a while may be familiar with the fact that the Unified Planning Work Program is basically the 1-year lookout for planning projects, budget for Metro's, the federal money that goes into Metro and supports their planning program, and then planning projects, transportation planning projects. And it's what's going to be spent over just in a 1-year period of time. So that is something that will be coming to JPAC for approval in the next couple of months. Another item that we also talked about that will be coming forward to JPAC in the next couple of months is setting the foundation for the 2028-2030 Regional Flexible Funds allocation program and the policies around that. So that's going to be a fairly detailed conversation over the next few months, again, that will kind of culminate in a JPAC action about the policy direction there in May or June, and Jamie can correct me if I'm wrong. And then finally, there was a presentation, again, setting the foundation for this new federal greenhouse gas performance measure requirements that are being required by FHWA. So TPAC got some foundational information. They'll be doing some work over the next few months. And again, this item will be going to JPAC in that May-June timeframe. So that's my high-level summary of the agenda that we had. Jamie, why don't you add some wonderful color and flavor as you typically do to these conversations?
Oh, flavor, you mean I'm a little spicy? Thank you, Karen. And you're a wonderful educator, by the way. I don't say that enough. So thank you for all you do. A few just small things to put a bug in your ear. With regard to the Regional Flexible Fund allocation, they're not in the room, but Ted and Grace did a phenomenal job summarizing all the feedback that's been percolating up in the region. And they captured our concerns, in my opinion, incredibly well. They did, however, mention the amount of money that could be on the table in step 2, which is the competitive local grants. And if I recall, the way this conversation is structured is if regional programs kind of continue on as currently sized, the money that could be on the table for local competitive grants this cycle could be in the range of like 60 million, which is a sizable increase over last cycle. So as you start thinking about the next few months, it may be beneficial to start thinking about if there's a local project in your community that may be appropriate for RUFA, knowing that we're still working through criteria, so that we're not caught off guard this fall when we can start actually applying for money. And then for the Unified Planning Work Program, just to note, there is a strong incentive to approve this document because it is prerequisite to receiving federal planning dollars. So it's a good thing to support. Yeah.
And within the UPWP, it's not a policy document. All of these conversations and decisions about funding the different planning projects that might be in there, or even kind of the outline of the various work that Metro does do, are reflective of past decisions that have been made. And so all of the items within that document are likely familiar to many of you. And then I will also make a comment to what Jamie said with regards to how the funding may be distributed within the Regional Flexible Funds program. This is the time that it is kind of interesting as they talk about the money that's dedicated to what they describe as step 1, which are the programs that are managed by Metro. But in addition, what else is in step 1 is the money that's allocated to paying back bonds for TriMet for past decisions around light rail. And that is what's covered in step 1. And then step 2 are really is the money that's available for local projects. And that's kind of the conversation that we often have. But one of the reasons why there may be more money available than last round in step 2 has to do with the fact that the projection for the amount of money that's needed to pay for the TriMet bonds over that three-year period of time is decreasing. And so there will likely be a conversation about how that, and I believe it's $13 million a year or in that range, maybe it's 12, how that money should be spent. And whether or not it should go directly into that step 2, or if there are other thoughts and conversations around that. Now, we have not necessarily ventured into that conversation yet at TPAC. Just at this foundational meeting was more, here are the conditions we know at the time to help us set the foundation for this conversation that's going to happen in the next couple of months.
Very good. Mayor Milch?
When you talk about funds becoming available.
Yes, could you say your name again? I'm sorry, I couldn't.
When you talk about funds available for local projects, one of the things that would be very helpful in these reports is to get some examples of the kinds of projects that are covered and maybe what's included in one bucket of funds and what isn't. I don't know if you're talking about ADA upgrades to sidewalks for walkability, signal improvements for safer intersections, adding first mile and last mile transportation options to make our transit system more usable. At what level or what kinds of things? And you don't have to give me an answer now, but in the future, if you could include some examples of the kinds of projects that have been covered under these funds in advance, it lets us know which bucket to look into for funds at the local level.
And I think that's an excellent point. And I do believe that that would be a really good conversation for us to have at our next C4 Metro Subcommittee meeting, because JPAC will be hearing that foundational conversation about the RFFA next month. So the timing may be right for us to really kind of set that foundation, so we all have the same understanding of the type of projects that are have been in the past funded through regional flexible funds.
Very good. Good comments. Having floated around here for years, I still have to focus very hard when we're talking about RFFA, UPWP, MTIP, all these different acronyms for various transportation related topics. And I'm, literally have to relearn every single time. Okay, what are we focusing on today? How has that impacted? What is that driving as the next step ultimately? So this is all very helpful to me. Any other comments or thoughts on TPAC before we transition on our agenda?
I just want to recognize Jamie and Karen for their awesome work that they've done over all these years to help guide us through this. So thank you so much for all you do. Great teamwork.
Yeah, we are, as we all know, it's the staff that have the brains, and they make us all look good on the public stage. So we greatly appreciate that. Very good. All right, transitioning on to our MPAC update. Hey, I guess that might be me. Mayor Buck, were you there last time? I don't think you were. You were traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Okay. At the last MPAC meeting, that was on February 28th. We had a couple of major topics that were covered. First one was an update on from the on the WPS, the Garbage and Recycling System Facilities Plan. And so a study had been done looking at various options for possible expansion in the future and what the impacts would be of the system. And so just taking a look at kind of, they laid out kind of 4 base scenarios that they provided impact on or provided feedback on. And so in looking at the existing facilities, the baseline scenario would be really no new facilities, just maintaining the current exposure across the board. And then also analyzing a full service model, so building 4 large transfer stations, and then also 2 new reuse facilities as an option. A distributed model, which would be a smaller mid-sized facility, but a broader network of those across all 3 counties. And then finally, a no-build scenario that would be renovating existing facilities, more partnerships, and investing in private facilities. And so, this survey was kind of out across various stakeholders. And I think for me, what I felt were the interesting takeaways. So probably, first and foremost, the takeaway that I saw in all of the various charts were proximity is key. The less someone has to, the more facilities that are located closer, that was the top priority in all scenarios from all stakeholders. And I think obviously having the various services as well was an important aspect of that. But to me, that was kind of the top takeaway. Really, we also had, of the most popular outcomes, it looked like the distributed outcome would be kind of top, and no build scenario also was certainly a scenario that had high marks across the board. So what that translates into going forward, obviously it's very early in this process, but one of the, I guess, another key takeaway as we went through this discussion was also bringing this back into the topic of pricing as well, and how that impacts pricing over a long period of time, because each of the various scenarios have a very broad impact from a cost structure perspective. And so I know Commissioner Shull at that point had brought up concerns about like the tip fee setting process. And when Metro originally adopted their process for the rates, they had projected out, or they adopted a policy structure, I believe, that had some bands around like a 7 to 8% or 7.1 to 7.9% projected cost increase structure to create a more predictable stream for the various jurisdictions. And right out of the box came out at 11% in the first year of increase. And so we've requested that they provide us an opportunity to understand that process better, and also to have MPAC involved in that discussion and the jurisdictions involved in that discussion early on versus after kind of the notification process. There's just something that's done and now we can talk about it. I know that we're kind of late in the process this year, so I don't know how much impact we'll have this year, but what we'd like to do is have them commit to bringing that forward earlier to MPAC and the jurisdictions in the future. Jay Cromwell is coordinating a follow-up conversation to that meeting so we can get a better feel for kind of what that rate setting structure looks like and how involved we can be with that. Did I miss anything on that? Is that any on that topic? Anybody have any other comments or thoughts on that? All right. And then the other conversation topic at MPAC was related to the urban growth management decision, and it was about population growth. We had some demographers come in and economists to talk about overarching demographics in the region. I find it easy to get deep in the weeds on that stuff and lose track of the purpose. And the purpose of the conversation, of course, is for them to either to rationalize potential urban growth boundary adjustments based on their population projections. And pretty much the outcome of that conversation was, theoretically, the metro area, we are shrinking. Theoretically, we have a population is leaving, not coming here. Our birth rate is down. We haven't had the same level of influx of individuals into the region that we used to have. There were some changes to, urban versus exurban population centers. Our employment growth seems to be slowing a little bit. Seems like our employment population ratio, so jobs per population, is pretty stable. But their argument is it might be topped out, so we're not going to see a growth. And really, what I took away from that entire conversation is the argument that maybe we don't need to grow the urban growth management area as much as there might be an ask for on the outside looking in. Councilor Lewis, is that a reasonable? Were my takeaways reasonable from that discussion?
I think overall, yes. I think the one thing I will say is, in terms of growth of the region, it's more complicated than people are just leaving right now, because the actual decline is mostly because we have more deaths than births, and that we have actually lost the influx that was making up for that. So it's less the media narrative of people are fleeing and more we are not doing our part and all having 2.1 children or whatever, and people are aging and dying. So that's kind of a foundational thing that the economists did a really nice job of fleshing out, that I think it's important we all have some awareness of.
No, I think that's a good comment on that. Yeah, I mean, at the meeting, I thought my suggestion that we need to procreate more was a good suggestion, but that kind of fell flat on the entire group. Nobody found that as funny as I thought it was. As my wife reminds me, I think I am funnier than I am. So, Mayor Milch, please.
I don't think it's that funny at all, because one of the things about this change in the demographics is that because there are fewer children being born, families are waiting longer to get married or to have children, if those two necessarily go together. We're seeing big declines in school enrollment statewide, and in big districts like Portland, it's like the equivalent of 10 campuses of schools that the enrollment has dropped, and they're facing closures. And I saw that Lake Oswego had an elementary school that you had to consider what the future of it. And here in Gladstone, we had we're cutting a couple of teaching positions at the very lower level, kindergarten and first grade, because we don't have enough children to support the number of classes we've had in the past. So that issue and the breakdown of where those population declines are and those reductions in numbers are very significant in terms of planning, particularly our educational focus in our communities.
Very good. Good comments. So that's what I've got on MPAC. Coming up, we've got a legislative update, and we are going to go back and continue that conversation on the urban growth management adjustment and our UGB capacity estimate needs. Obviously, it's a more complicated conversation than just births and deaths. It's about housing and jobs and many other things as well. So any other, let's see how we're doing time-wise. Any other comments or thoughts on MPAC? And then we can wrap our meeting unless there's anything else for the good of the order.
I just
Right.
want to say, and maybe Brian, can you just affirm about the C4 retreat date? We might have some
Yes,
people
it's
here in this
June.
room that we don't have a C4 sometimes, so.
Yeah, it's June 14th and 15th. Thank you for bringing that up. And actually, in the chat, I'm going to put a link to the survey. We're asking for feedback and input on the agenda for the retreat. It's only a 2 to 3 minute survey, so ask if you haven't already. But please go ahead and fill that out and save the dates. Again, June 14 and 15.
Very good. And as in the past, we've invited not just C4 members or subcommittee members, but I mean, I put out the invite to City Council last night, and you know, the more voices we can have, the better. So plus, I want to hang out with all you guys for an evening. So, you know, there's that. Very good. All right. Well, other than some clouds, it's going to be a lovely spring day. So go out and get them today. Good to see you all. Thank you very much. That will call it a day for our C4 Metro Subcommittee.